Hello and welcome to the Knight Knox podcast. My name's Samantha Jones and I'm the marketing director here at Knight Knox. And today we're joined by Catalina Ionita from Chapman Taylor. Hi, Kat. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. it means a lot, honestly.
No, thank you for coming in. To start off with, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, my name is Catalina Ionita. I'm a senior architect at Chapman Taylor. I'm also just finalized my PhD.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It just feels really strange to say that because it was something I identified with for the last 4 years. I was always studying. So I'm really grateful to be able to put that behind me and just enjoy freedom.
Relax now.
Yeah. And I'm also teaching 1 day a week at Manchester School of Architecture.
Amazing.
Which aligns really well with my research. So yeah, I guess I'm a bit of a dual kind of person, dipping my toes in architecture, but also research.
Oh, great. That must be really interesting.
Yeah, I know. I think I've always been a little bit of a nerd, if I'm honest.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So ever since I was little, I was really passionate about reading and researching. I was actually considering a career in journalism as my plan B. So I think doing the research and the PhD alongside practicing architecture was that perfect, combination of being able to do practical things, but also research and contribute to knowledge within the industry. In that sense, it worked quite well.
So how did you get into architecture then? What made you veer away from journalism?
I went to the art school since I was 10 in my home country, Romania. And initially I was actually studying music. I would say I'm naturally quite an artistic person. I like to experiment with various different things. And randomly, when I was 14, 15, I was invited by one of the tutors in the school to attend a free drawing class.
Okay.
And most of my colleagues went to that class, and I went along, and I discovered that, oh my God, I really like drawing. Like, that's so fascinating. And just like that, within less than a year, I changed my vision and my focus completely. And as I went into college in Romania, I went to the architecture college, which was part of the same art school I was studying at. And ever since, I thought that would be the career for me.
Wow, that's amazing. So what would you say some of your biggest achievements have been since you became an architect?
Oh, it's always so tough to speak about yourself. I guess coming to be accepted at 5 universities in the UK for someone who comes from Romania, let's be honest, an Eastern European country. It was really tough for my parents to support me to be here because I didn't qualify for loans and things like that perhaps, nationals would qualify for. That was one of my biggest achievements, just to be able to leave Romania and to experiment something new. And then I fell in love with the UK, and I've been here now for 14 years.
Have you always lived in Manchester or?
No, I've been here for 6 years, and before I was in Sheffield and Huddersfield, always in the north. I love the north. So it is my home now. And more recently, I would say in terms of achievements, definitely my PhD is something that, first of all, I wasn't considering doing. I was invited by my master's tutors to do. They thought that I would be suitable for something like that, and I'm incredibly grateful for their kind of encouragement.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I thought that I would be doing at this moment in my career. I started the PhD when I was qualifying as an architect, and I just never planned to do that at this stage in my career. But I would hands-on say that that's probably my biggest achievement.
It's a really big achievement. You should be really proud. So what's the funniest work story you can tell us?
Funny work story. I guess, I don't know if it's necessarily funny, but standing out because you're a little bit quirky or different. I think I'm always that slightly crazy person in the room, and maybe sometimes I say the wrong thing or I say things a little bit differently, and that sometimes brings just like shapes the atmosphere in a different way. So I definitely make an impression on my colleagues.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so talking about Manchester specifically, obviously you said you've worked here for, quite a number of years now. So Manchester skyline, it's transformed dramatically in recent years, especially with the addition of more high-rise buildings. It was previously, we only had the Beetham Tower, and then things have skyrocketed. What do you think is driving this change?
I would say that I find Manchester to be a very entrepreneurial city. And I think that's really interesting about it. It's not really competing to other places. It's creating its own identity. And I love the fact that there's so much drive for progress, for growth. There's so much ambition to be doing more. And yes, we have all the new skyline, skyscrapers kind of going on, like Deansgate Square. I think, there are many people who are criticizing the kind of vast progress.
It can be quite controversial, can't it, when you speak to some people?
In my opinion, I think what's really interesting about the way the city is shaping is the fact that we do not have that kind of London or Dubai feel where a building is competing with each other. It feels more like they are complementing each other, and they're intentionally trying to marry up with each other and be part of something together. And I know other people have been speaking about it, even like Jonathan Schofield in Manchester Confidentials was speaking about how intentionally as a city we want to drive forward an image, a skyline that is more kind of connected, and everything is kind of working together. So I'm quite excited about this aspect of it. Obviously, the skyline will continue to change. There are more developments happening. What I think we should be perhaps doing more is instead of creating or like alongside creating these new buildings, which inevitably they will happen, is also focusing on the connections between them.
Yes.
And how do you get, from Deansgate Square to Mayfield? What is the experiential journey for a pedestrian to walk through the city? I think
especially as it's becoming increasingly more pedestrianised now. So, they don't want people to drive cars. A lot of Deansgate's pedestrianised now. The narrative is it's a walkable city.
Yeah. And I think that should be the focus, especially linking to my research, which is about urban activation and placemaking. I think that is how the city would prioritize more the inclusive design, bringing more families into the city center, creating healthier, more intergenerational demographics within the city center. I think perhaps that is something that collectively and as an industry we could be working more towards. I'm very excited about the skyline changing, but I think my ambition, and if there's something that I can contribute in my role as an architect and urban designer, is to work on those connections and look at how can you get to a place to another in a more friendly way.
Well, Manchester I don't think we've ever been described as a soulless city, have we? It's always been described as one of the friendliest cities, about people come and immediately feel at home.
Yeah.
So we don't want, and I don't think the new buildings are contributing to that. I think they're enhancing it. I think it's bringing a lot more people into the city than maybe would have come into the city before.
Yeah, there are so many people relocating from London and other cities. Even in Chapman Taylor, we have various colleagues relocating from other studios in the UK to our Manchester studio. And it's not just the studio culture, which of course plays a big kind of role in it, is the city itself. And I mean, I speak for myself as a Romanian who came to the UK. I chose Manchester as my home. I've been here for 6 years, and I do consider it a place where I'm going to live. And it is a testament to the people. People created the places, and therefore, that's kind of the gel that maintains the activity and community feeling.
No, so I completely agree. So building on that, what are some of the upcoming developments that you think will have the biggest impact on the skyline? Do you think are there any designs in place that you think that that's going to stand out, that's going to look good?
Well, the St. John development, like the master plan, that's going to change the skyline quite dramatically.
Yeah.
And it's already kind of growing. More on like the Middlewood Locks area, like the territory A of that big development is going to come into fruition in the next, I would say, 5-10 years. And what I like about that development, and I'm biased because I worked on the first phases.
That's allowed.
Like 10 years ago when I lived in Sheffield. I like the fact that it has a more domestic feel and is a bit more like human scaled. So I think variety would be interesting to see alongside these kind of new things popping out. I'm also really excited about what's happening outside of the ring road. Like around Media City, we have Ida kind of creating an anchor building at the bottom of Sulphur Keys. It's been voted for a year now in HomeView's report as the best kind of build to rent development in the country, which is super exciting. And this is not just about design. It's about how people feel in the building and how they enjoy living in that place and what that place offers them.
It's a lot more community feel, isn't it? You know, these high-rise buildings, they're not just about you live in an apartment and don't, you know, never see your neighbours. I think that's one of the biggest things that's different about these new high-rises. That I think they are purposefully creating a community feel about them. You can see that in the apps they give their tenants. You know, the events they put on for the people that live there, for the residents. It's very different, I think, to what people sometimes think as a traditional apartment or city living.
It's the curation, I think. I mean, Manchester is recognised as the capital of build to rent in the UK. We have many developments, and also they're all quite different, and the offer is quite wide, which is really good. We have different price ranges, like the low, medium, high, to cater to different demographics. But I think the reason why this product is working so well is the focus on the resident, on the customer, to drive that kind of hospitality-led experience for our customers. So that's why places like Ida, Colliers, Angel Gardens are working so well, because they prioritize how people feel in those buildings. Yeah, Angel Gardens is a huge one, isn't it? Yeah, and I guess it's also, I think, combining the existing communities that are there as well, which is really important. Yeah, well, I think that's one in particular, and also campus are really good examples for that. Is understanding as designers, and also this is where the client tip comes into place, because the more if you're working with attuned clients who understand the product, and when they have a vision, they have a clear brand, is really smooth to develop a product that really responds to that area, to the context. So a place like campus, it is a build to rent development. However, what is really interesting about it is the understanding that building is located in a very well-connected area that already has many amenities around. So a lot of coffee shops, and restaurants, sort of bars. Exactly. So what you're providing within the building, it has to respond to what is there. You don't want to over-provide or something that is already present in the area, and they're doing it so much better. Like, for instance, for any BTR development, I would say, if there's a great gym next door, maybe instead of providing another gym within the building, offer a reduced rate to that gym for the residents. I think that's far more interesting. So do you think that's why, so for investors, do you think this is what makes Manchester a more standout city compared to other cities? So we said that the buy-to-let market is huge, more so than it's ever been. I mean, we still know that you're so underdeveloped when it comes to actual homes. There's still, a lack there. There's still more people looking than live in the city. So for landlords, they actually are turning to Manchester now as opposed to London, where that may have not been the case 10 years ago. Yeah, I think it's the opportunities that are available here. And like I said, it is the city centre, but not only is the satellites around the city centre that are huge potentials for investors, as institutional kind of investors to develop something. For instance, we're working on something not far from where we are now, a Trafford Wharf is a build-to-rent development with called Waterhouse on the back of the success of Ida, and something far bigger and more interesting, and is responding to the edge of the canal in a really positive way, because I think this entire area is still a bit sterile.
I think it's probably one of the last parts, isn't it? Just along the canal, going into Manchester, there's this pockets, but it all needs connecting up now.
Yeah. But other places as well, like Bury, Stockport. I'm expecting Stockport to grow a lot, and I think it is already.
It's a £5 billion master plan.
All of these places, they do not have to live in the shadow of the great city that Manchester is.
Well, I think there's been a big focus on connectivity over the last even 5 years, I'd say. There's been a big push on the tram network, the bus network, the trains.
Yeah.
Just really trying to push people. And I think when people talk about Manchester now, you're right, they don't just talk about the city centre.
Yeah.
They talk about the connection to places like Charlton, Didsbury, Stockport, all the media city, the surrounding areas where living in the city centre, I think that's what draws people in. It's walkable. It's a 10-minute tram ride to somewhere else with just as many amazing bars, restaurants, walks.
And I think is the uniqueness and the character of all of these satellite areas. They all have a different feel to them. And I know there are many people who say, oh, well, it's too far away. But if you come with like the London mentality where you're always commuting, all my friends who live in London, they commute for an hour every day to go to work.
Because no one lives in the city centre.
Exactly. It's incredibly unaffordable to live in central London. So you live in areas like Brockley or, Croydon, and then you're always kind of going in.
Transport costs are huge.
Exactly. So I think here, the fact that, we have the B network is so incredible. Let's push for stuff like that. Like that really tells me that, the leadership, like we are going ahead in like the right direction, because we're prioritizing people who live in Manchester, their experiences, traveling in a more sustainable way to the city centre, and accessing these satellites in a more accessible and kind of sustainable way. And the variety of the products that we can have here that other cities cannot perhaps accommodate because they're overly developed. So we can have suburban build to rent. We could have different kind of densities around, the satellites, because we have the availability of land. Also converting existing buildings, I think is huge
potential.
There's
a lot of stock, isn't there, that can be converted into different spaces. Again, not just apartments, but the amenities we were talking about. Do you think that's so in terms of like trends maybe in the Manchester property market right now? Do you think that's more leaning towards, like we say, the amenities, that there's more of a focus on that, so to speak? Or?
I think it's a leisure-driven society now. We go out for experiences. We go out to explore different things. And I think, it's really important to understand that the customer behaviors psychologically have changed a lot in the last 5 years, especially on the back of the pandemic. And I think that's why build to rent as a product is incredibly successful, is because younger generations are more likely to invest in different ways, like microtransactions, stocks, crypto, which is very different to what our parents would think that is a good way to, save for the future. There would be more like you need to own a house or things like that. So
it's more the investment market, so the buy-to-let market, where they can see that it's not necessarily about owning something to live in. It's about, well, I could become a landlord, or I could, own something that is going to make me money while I do something else.
Yeah. And I think many models are starting to also explore this idea of tokenizing products. So you can buy shares into a big development. Like you don't own a flat, an apartment, but you have a share in the profit of something big, of a big build to rent building. So I think that's something that perhaps, maybe Asian markets coming into the country will look to explore.
So is there a particular area of Manchester right now that you think investors should be looking at? Like, where would you be your tip to say, actually, I think this is an up and coming area? Or
I definitely believe in Salford, perhaps because I live in Salford, but again, I'm biased. But I think it has fantastic opportunities, so close to the city center. You can literally walk in half an hour.
It's very well connected.
It's very well. The
trams and buses are really
so good. Yeah. I think Stockport is kind of obvious and is already ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of stuff will happen there. I think Barry, I'm really quite interested in how the entire city center is shaping there, because there's a JV between the Barry Council and Bruntwood, and they are redeveloping the market, the mill, I think it's called, into something that is quite special, a mixed-use development where it's not just about the retail experience, but bringing the amenities into it, bringing residential. I think that's quite exciting. Inevitably, places like Sale or Altrincham will continue to thrive, but I think they're already kind of shaped. I think Altrincham is actually a great example, because 30 years it was suffering a lot, and actually people were moving out of Altrincham, and it only took that one catalyst project, the Altrincham Market, and the vision to use it in a way that is not just a place where you have like shops, like it's prioritizing the community. You have independent kind of F&B offers, and it's catalyzing those offers in a way that is attracting people and then encouraging others to do things around them. And I think that's a really good example of placemaking, how one kind of project can snowball a lot, and then of course it became incredibly desirable to live there. And perhaps other issues arise with becoming like that, so like gentrification and things like that, and being unaffordable.
I suppose it's an interesting question, because you've got both sides of the coin. You want a play, like you mentioned, Sale, the centre there, the squares. There are so many bars, restaurants, independents there now, that it's a really lively place to be, where even 5-6 years ago it wasn't. And that has got such a different feel to it now. And everything, I suppose the big question is, everything still needs to be affordable. But you want people to move into those places.
It's maintaining the accessibility. I think, I don't have the answer, but I think this is a real challenge. And I think every place should, first of all, have a vision, or where do they want to go? And how do they want to shape that place? And I think that will drive development in the right way. Kind of monitoring how the scale and mass is evolving, and how would they all work with each other, rather than just wait for something to happen and then work around it. But then it is making sure that we're not displacing existing communities, that we are building from within, that we are mindful of what's already there, of the character of the areas. And essentially we don't want to force people out, which in many cases it does happen. And I think that's quite sad. I think it happened a lot in London around when they were doing the Olympic Village. I think many people were displaced there. So
but
this
that's the difference
mindful.
of what's happening in Manchester, is that the city centre traditionally no one has lived there. So actually all the new development is bringing people back into the city centre. So it's actually a good starting point.
But no, for sure. I completely agree with that. I also think that the offer should be a bit more inclusive. So, people with different kind of earnings can access property within these places. So it's more inclusive. I believe that, to create a more inclusive society, you have to have all demographics, different people living together. Many developments, they're not designed with that idea of like pepper potting everything. So when you're just looking at the development, it's tenure blind. I mean, in my view, that should be always the purpose as designers, as well. We want to have tenure blind developments, but it's often the case that you can see, oh, that's the social housing block. And you see that kind of stigma and how intentionally they look different, or they have cheaper specifications, cheaper materials. I think if we can move away from that idea and we believe in people having different demographics and different kind of like people with different earnings together is not a bad thing.
No,
it's actually really healthy. Society is not divided in a way where you have rich people and poor people. We're engaging with each other on a daily basis. We need to coexist.
It happens every day at work, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously, just moving to a slightly different subject, sustainability, really big buzzword these days. How do you think developers in Manchester are addressing the need for eco-friendly buildings? Or do you think there's a lot more that still needs to be done?
I mean, it is the buzzword that needs to be done. In my opinion, there are some people who are quite cognizant to the climate emergency, but because it's not driven from the government, it's really tough to really address it. So we hear, everybody has an ESG agenda, policy, and I think it's a bit shallow. It's not just Manchester centric, it's country centric. I think there was a talk recently about Manchester's ambition to respond to the climate emergency, and I think there was scrutiny that is impossible to meet it. Like, I think as a city, we're already behind.
Yeah. I think most cities are behind in their policy development. Like you say, that's more driven from central government rather than it being a city.
I just think we need to do more. Like, the reality is that we need to stop thinking just about ourselves and our limited time here. We need to think about the future generations. How are they going to, inhabit this planet when, they're going to suffer the consequences of our work? I think technology is the kind of key ingredient to it. Like, look at what AI has done to everything in a year's time. I really believe with the use of technology, we can create more sustainable materials. We can test buildings. We can test existing conditions in a better way. We need to retrofit more and think about retrofitting as the first solution as opposed to demolishing and building new. There's so much existing stock.
Cost effective as well.
Well, yes, of course. But yeah, absolutely. Cost is a big kind of topic.
I think sometimes that's what is the stumbling block, isn't it?
Yeah. But I feel like sustainability doesn't have to be more expensive. And I think the reason why most times it ends up being more expensive is because it wasn't considered at the first stage. Like, when we start designing, like even in stage 0, when we're just talking about the project, if we are already aware that we want to design something that is more sustainable, is above building regulations, it won't be more expensive. Robust, long-lasting materials are very often cheaper. Like, everything that we use in build to rent is actually is of robust quality because, that asset has to be maintained for a long number of years. We don't want to continually fix and repair. But those materials actually are much cheaper than fancy, new kind of contemporary solutions. It's also understanding that sometimes new materials that perhaps have less embodied carbon, that have been just kind of recently created, might not last a long time. So sometimes it's better to have perhaps materials that do not perform incredibly well on embodied carbon, but they are more long lasting. So they have a longer kind of lifespan. So it's looking at every single ingredient that goes into our buildings with scrutiny and understanding, okay, we might not save on embodied carbon at this point, but from an operational perspective, we will save massively in 50 years' time. So it's understanding for, how do we want to maintain, what are the operational costs, and what we're saving on embodied, what we're like saving now on embodied, like money-wise, we will be, benefiting
further down the line.
Exactly, from an operational perspective.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more.
A lot more.
Yeah. And, but that's more kind of like the way we build.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer that it needs to be linked to the S and the G in ESG, environmental social governance. And, my colleague, Alex Esfahani, our head of sustainability at Chapman Taylor, he told me something, really interesting that I really liked the other day. that don't you think we should be talking about ESG as GSE? Like governance should be the top.
The top.
Like how could we solve things that are, focused on how do we design in a more environmentally friendly way? How can we create more inclusive environments for people, communities, if the governance itself is not sorted?
It's not in place.
So if each organization, if designers, investors, developers, everyone focuses on getting their governance right, I think then those kind of learnings will feed down, they will kind of snowball into the others as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it.
I thought so too. I wanted to steal it, but I couldn't. I had to.
No, credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
So what do you think the future holds for Manchester's skyline the next 10 to 20 years? Are there any emerging architectural trends that you think are going to shape the city? Anything new coming up, or?
I think we're going to see a lot more of like this kind of variety on different ways of living that is not necessarily like buying an apartment. I mean, I spoke a lot about residential, but I think also more co-working space.
Okay.
The ability to work in different spaces, more engaging spaces. I think we see a lot of like those kind of co-working spaces popping out around the city center. They're very desirable. Prioritizing flexible working as well, working from different places, being able to go to the studio, not necessarily to do the work, but for the social aspect. I think there's going to be a lot of retrofit internally to adapt workplaces to prioritize these social interactions. Even the way we are sitting at our desks, I think we're moving away from that traditional kind of, a desk and a screen, and that's my desk. I think we see more and more businesses starting to hot desk, have more limited seats, and then more kind of interesting experiential places where people can congregate and have small informal meeting areas as part of their working day.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of changes happening, I think, at the moment. You can see it, drifting in. And I do think the social aspect, like you say, is really important, especially if people are maybe working from home now. I think what we're finding more and more is that people are missing maybe that contact.
Yes, absolutely.
And, we all know that, we are social creatures. We enjoy one-on-one contact.
Yeah.
It's what, most people do. But it is healthy. So I think that, especially if, forming those, like you say, with people coming in for those relationships.
Yeah.
So people who are living in the city, who want to come in, who are forming these communities.
Yeah.
They're actually looking for that aspect.
They're
looking for the community
interaction.
feeling. So I think especially a lot of these new builds, the high rises, going back to what we said at the beginning, which is it's not just an apartment to live in. It's a community.
Yeah.
It's a city. It's, it's almost coming full circle again, really.
Well, we say sleep in the apartment, live in the building. Like the idea is that you go and occupy and you make those spaces your own. And I think that's really interesting. I would hope that the city would also do more for communities, like do things that are free as well.
Yeah.
Like everything seems to be, coffee shop, fancy restaurant, it's, which is great. We want to have the offer. We want to have the variety. I think we need to integrate within those kind of, let's imagine Deansgate, for instance, that I think, is still a little bit sterile and it needs to have more soul to it. There are many estate agents. I think there's a lot of the same. I think it can be pepper potted in a more kind of inclusive way. It would be nice to see that we have uses that are accessible where you don't have to necessarily spend money to be there.
A lot more, maybe some community projects, social areas, social, communities and places for, and again, we're not just talking about young professionals. If we want to get that more inclusive feel and we want more young adults to come to the city, then we need things for them to do where they might not be able to afford to go out and spend money.
And also, I think I would like to see more young families in the city.
Absolutely.
I lived in Romania. I mean, it's a post-communist country, so it's defined by huge concrete blocks. So I lived most of my life in an apartment. But we were surrounded by, in our immediate area, there were 3 playgrounds and parks, and everything was like really green. Because it was kind of an ideology everybody's like super dense for living, but you have all of this vast outdoor space where these families and children can play safely. I want to see more encouragement to keep people in the city center, to have new families wanting to stay, because it makes the city a more vibrant place.
Yeah.
I think what they're doing at Great Northern, they have a free to access children's play den inside where the Odeon cinema is. So you take the steps up and you go inside, and it's a really lovely kind of pod that is free to use for mothers and children. And it's really successful. Or they have a sand pit in the square where Almost Famous is.
Yes.
Is very, very successful. They were monitoring the activity and is like a really hot spot for young families. And secondly, I think creating the city a more inclusive place for elderly.
Accessibility.
Exactly.
Being able to get from A to B without, having to walk there. But it's got to be affordable as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I think perhaps build to rent, like selling your house when your children have all left. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you're on your own or something. You have a pet. You can move into a BTR scheme, incredibly well connected. You have all the shops nearby. You can go to the theater. You can go to different kind of clubs and have a kind of nice active life. We are still able to have a pet because BTR schemes are pet friendly. I think having elderly in the city is really exciting. In Romania, there's this trend that happens to like most families where typically our grandparents lived in a village, in a house, and the young family would live in the city. But there would be a switch point where they would swap their houses. So my grandmother moved in our flat and we moved into their home because my parents my dad wanted to grow grapes and make wine, and we had the land. My grandma had the land, but she couldn't live in the village on her own anymore because she had accessibility issues. But she could go to the shop in the city. She could go to the pharmacy. She could go to the market.
It's a really interesting concept. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of topics there. What are your plans now? Moving forward, what's the next thing you're working on? Inside or outside of work?
I actually forgot to mention. We're both part of the Women in Property Northwest Committee. Sometimes I don't know. I feel like we take it for granted because it's so intrinsic and part of like what we're doing.
Yeah.
I love this organization, and I should say is the main reason why I have a network and friends in Manchester. I joined when I moved to Manchester, and I was in a really small office at the time where I didn't have any connections. So Women in Property was the best possible network that I could have joined. It offered so much opportunity for me, and it's such an inclusive and safe place. So we're organizing an event on the role of EDI in sustainability.
Okay.
We're planning it for November. So I'm really interested and see like how this kind of agenda will evolve.
So I'm assuming that will then include some of the topics we've just been talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Now. And is that more to try and get an ideas of how we move sustainability forward as a city?
Also to tease people to understand like what their kind of position is on the matter and how ambitious they are. Opening up to more, people say difficult conversations, but they're not difficult. We should just be more transparent about these topics.
Talk about what we think are the obstacles and what are the problems. And then is it not just that we keep saying, we can't do it because of, it's more of a, well, how can we overcome that?
Exactly. Yeah. So fingers crossed for that one. It's still in the making now.
I'm sure it will go well. Well, thank you so much for coming in. So we thought we'd do a little bit of fun at the end.
Oh dear.
So quick fire questions. You don't have time to think. You just have to answer. So Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, water.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Go-to karaoke song?
Unwritten.
Oh, work or play?
Work.
A passion fruit martini or an espresso martini?
Oh, always passion.
Always.
Passion fruit. Yeah.
If your pet could talk, what would they say about you?
You're crazy.
And then who was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, God. Gerard Butler.
That's not a bad one. We've all been there.
But I also really like Sofia Vergara, so yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in, Kat.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure. Thank you.
Genuinely, thank you so much. It was a privilege. And thank you so much.
Thank you.